Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Digging Deeper Moment. The mission of our Digging Deeper Moments is to take God's Word to God's world. We're so glad that you joined us. If you have not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so because it will help us spread our Digging Deeper Moments to others. Thank you very much. Over the past 3 weeks, we've seen how that Hebrew writing repeats itself on both the macro and micro levels. Last week, we looked at an outline form called a chiasmus. A chiasmus, or chiasm, is an outline that repeats itself, but in reverse order. ABC, CBA. We looked at some examples of this on the micro level last week. But a chiasm outline also is used on a macro level. For instance, the story of Noah and the story of Joseph are both arranged in a chiasm. The following outline is taken from an article by Greg Tull in the August 2020 edition of the Bible Study Magazine, pages 22 through 23. And Jonathan has it up here on the screen for you. If you'll notice, letter A, this was really amazing when I saw it, and I never saw it before until I read this article. The beginning of the story in Genesis 37, 2 through 11. Letter B, Jacob mourns Joseph, Genesis 37, 12 through 26. Then there's the reversal of the firstborn. This is the story of Judah in Genesis 38. Then Joseph is enslaved in Egypt in Genesis 39. Letter E is favor and disfavor before Pharaoh. This is Genesis 40 through 41. Then we have letter F, the brothers journey to Egypt to get grain. This is Genesis 42 through 43. And then the center is Joseph revealing himself to his brothers in chapter 44 through chapter 45, verse 20. Then letter F, we start to reverse the story again. Letter F, Jacob journeys to Egypt in chapter 45 through chapter 46 to 30. Letter E, there's favor before Pharaoh in Genesis 46, 31 through 47, 12. Got to remember that the verses of the Bible are not inspired, like the numbers of the verses are not inspired. So people put them where they thought they'd go best, but we probably could redo them if we were going to follow the story better. Letter D, we have Joseph enslaves Egypt, chapter 47 through 13, verse 27. We have the reversals of the firstborn in Genesis 47, 28 through 49, 28. Joseph mourns Jacob's death in Genesis 49, 29 through 50, 14. And then we have a conclusion, or the conclusion of Joseph's story in chapter 50 through verse 15 through 26. Notice how they mirror each other. This is what a chiasm does. It starts ABC and then reverses itself CBA. This is very common in the Old Testament. And I have to admit, before I read this article, I didn't see how this arrangement was like this. But now you can see it, you can't unsee it. And we see the same thing in the story of Noah. You know, I didn't see this one about the story of Noah until I did this Digging Deeper moment. And I was looking at Wikipedia, and of all places, Wikipedia reveals that the story of Noah found in Genesis 6, chapter 6 through chapter 9 is actually arranged in a chiasm. And you can see up here on the screen. Letter A, Noah and his sons. Then you have B, all life on the earth. C, the curse on the earth. Letter D, the flood is announced. Letter E, the ark. Letter F, all living creatures. Letter G, the food. Letter H, animals in man's hands. Letter I, entering the ark. And then letter J, waters increase. But notice letter right in the center, God remembers Noah, chapter 8, verse 1. This is the main point of the story, that God is remembering Noah. And in remembering Noah, he's remembering humanity. Then we reverse order. The waters decrease. Notice how J and J are the same. Letter H, the animals. Who enters the animals in the beginning? In letter I, in the first half, is the animals. And so you go down and you see the food in letter G, letter F, all living creatures, E. And you can study this on your own, but you see how the writers arrange their material in this reverse order. This is the way Hebrew is written. These are the outline they like to use. It's not the only outline they use, as we'll see in a moment. But it's a very common one, and you're going to begin to see these as you study the Bible all over the place. Now, there's one more way in which Hebrew writers repeated themselves, and I've only made a slight reference to it, but this is true both on the micro and macro levels, and this is called parallelism. Parallelism is a form of outline, just like a chiasmus is a form of outline. They're similar, but they're slightly different. The Academy 4SC website explains the difference between these two extremely well when they write. Parallelism is a literary technique in which two or more consecutive phrases repeat the same grammatical structure with just a few word changes each time. Note that when you're using parallelism, I don't know if I can get it, parallelism, the new words you put in must be the same part of speech as the original words that are being replaced. Now, folks, this is really well written. For example, take a look at Neil Armstrong's famous quote, "That's one step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Both of the phrases here take this structure, one blank for blank, and then therefore giant leap replaces step while mankind replaces man. And you can see that each noun in the original phrase is substitute with another noun. Now, chiasmus is a literary technique involving two consecutive phrases in which the second phrase, and we've seen also an outline on a bigger scale, it repeats the grammatical structure but in reverse order. So, and he uses the example on this website of, check out President John F. Kennedy's quote from his address before the United Nations when he says, "Mankind must put an end to war, or war will put an end to mankind." The words mankind and war have swapped places, as well as the grammatical functions in the sentence. And so that's just a little bit more technical, but the idea is that you have a chiasmus which reverses order as an outline, and parallelism is a repetition outline. And so this is also used throughout the Bible, and we see it both on the macro and micro levels. On the micro level, we see Jesus use it in Matthew 6, 9, and 10 when he says, "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as is in heaven." The words "your kingdom come" means the same thing as "your will be done." He's not saying two different things. This is a parallelism. This is a repetition. And so we see this parallelism on the micro level, but we also see it on a macro level. Now, all this is important because as we study the prophets, we have to understand the literary structures that they're using in order to understand what they're trying to tell us. And that's why these things are important, because it will help us get out of our English frame of mind and more into the Hebraic frame of mind, which will help us better understand what they're saying. And so we see this on the macro level. We see this parallelism on the macro scale, and it's found in the very first chapter of the Bible, in the story of creation found in Genesis chapter 1. Now, this is an outline that I have developed recently as I've been preparing other material. But if you look at Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 2, we have a statement where God creates the heavens and the earth unfinished. Now, I want you to notice that when this story is over, it's over in Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, when God rests on day 7, but all is finished. This is parallelism. I can't say that today, parallelism, okay? I need to have Jonathan insert a little thing over my mouth here. But the point being is that the creation story begins with being unfinished and ends with being finished. And that's intentional by the writer. And then we have 6 days of creation in between. And on day 1, God forms the heavens, that's space, earth, and light. On day 2, God forms the expanse, which we call the sky or the atmosphere. And then on day 3, as well as he separates the water, so there's water above the heavens and waters below. On day 3, God forms the land and the sea. So he separates the earth from the sea, and then there's the water is now grouped into different seas. And then we start back in repetition, but it doesn't reverse. On day 4, God fills what he formerly formed on day 1. He fills the heavens with lights. And day 5, God fills the expanse in the sky and the seas, the water below the sky. And in day 6, God fills the earth with land creatures. And so what we see is this parallelism. This is very important because these are the kinds of ways that Hebrew repeats itself, and we're not accustomed to this because we don't think this way. And so the second 3 days of creation are parallel to the first 3. And so, the first thing we need to keep in mind when it comes to understanding the prophets is how the Hebrew writers thought and how they wrote. They wrote in recursive fashion. They repeated themselves. And this will become very evident as we study the prophets. If this lesson helped you, please share it with a friend, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel, or check out our Sunday morning live podcast on either Apple or Spotify. And if you'd like to partner with us as we take God's Word to God's world, you can do so by going to our website and clicking the How to Give tab. I hope to see you next week. God bless.